John, how are you doing?
Great. How are you?
Doing good. Excited to be here for our AI Revenue Summit. Really excited to have you join us. And like Jenny said, if you don't know about John, you must be living under a rock or you're brand new to the space. Um, John, just to give a little background, one of the OGs of digital marketing, was co-founder and CMO at Marketo, and then founder and CEO at Engagio, and now CMO at Demandbase. And if you haven't looked into Demandbase and how it can help you with your ABM and your ABX efforts, go take a look. They've got a great solution for that. So before we get into AI, John, well, let's get right into the AI. We want to talk about how Demandbase is using AI both on your marketing team and then also just in the product as well. So let's start with your team. How has your team been starting to use AI?
Sure. I mean, I think we're doing some interesting things. And frankly, there's a lot of really cool, interesting stuff kind of going on out there.
Yeah.
I think I'll start answering this by talking. I've probably learned the most myself about what's happening in AI from Chris Penn. So shout out to everything Chris is writing about, his weekly newsletter. He recently came out with a book, called the Woefully Incomplete Guide to Generative AI in Marketing, or something like that. I definitely encourage folks to go check that book out. And he's got a framework in that book for kind of the 6 main use cases that companies are using AI in marketing. So I kind of figured I'd use that framework here to kind of explain a little bit about what we're doing at Demandbase and also kind of share some other thoughts.
Great. Let's go through it.
And I won't do it in the direct order of how he lists them. But, one of the use cases, the one that sort of we all got excited about when we first saw GP2 is true generation. Like literally producing content such as like a LinkedIn post or a blog post or something like that.
Yep.
And I would say the reality is, most of that content is not particularly good. And I think we've all seen that, and with the right prompt engineering, you can make it better. But it's still never going to be super duper great. And so I sort of encourage my team not to use it for that use case very much.
Okay.
The one use case that we've done that other people have also done is sort of comparing, what GPT says about something versus what, the experts say, or what so we have a post like what our customers say versus what GPT says. And that's sort of just playing with this use case of generation, but we don't use a ton of that one.
Okay.
The next couple of use cases we use a lot more. The second one is what Chris calls question answering. And this is sort of using the AI as your brainstorm buddy, your idea generation buddy. So even for preparing for a panel like this, if there's a question asked, obviously I'm going to use my own critical thinking and like think of some ideas, but it's not a terrible idea to go put the question into GPT and, just at least it prompts some thinking and ideas. So again, kind of thinking like a brainstorm buddy, if you will.
Okay.
And, obviously with that use case, you have to sort of watch out for hallucinations. You may not get stuff that's right, but again, kind of for idea generation, it can be pretty useful. The third one that we use the most is summarization.
Okay.
So what I always tell my team, you have to remember, in GPT, the T stands for transformer, not creator. What that means is these tools are actually really, really good at content transformation, taking something that you in one form and turning it into another form. So some examples of things, that we're doing there. Take a webinar transcript that we get off of any of the different tools that are used out there, put that into GPT and have that summarize it into the key findings, and then turn that into a blog post. right? That's not really raw generation because you've given it a ton of content to work with. And the more content you can give to work with, the better output you're going to ultimately get. I've even run some of the output of that exercise through GPT detectors like Zero GPT, and it says it's human written because it's not going off of its standard database of the words that tend to be tied together. It's transforming existing content that you've given it.
Interesting. So
go ahead.
You don't mind me just like digging in a little bit. So like, example, you put out a ton of content yourself, John. I wish I could keep up with you, but you write a lot of ebooks and some hard copy books. You could put one of those books in there or a chapter of the book and say, hey, give me a blog post on this rather than like a chapter on a book.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I've been using to draft a lot of my LinkedIn posts.
Yeah.
Again, never just like, hey, create something from scratch, but hey, here's an article somebody wrote. What are the key insights here? And how would I turn that into something that I want to say on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Other examples of what I would put under this kind of summarization transformation bucket. Here's a press release. Come up with 3 headlines for this press release, or a subject line for an email. Things like that. It can be kind of really effective, which kind of leads us into the 4th use case, which is rewriting. And again, we'll use it for this. Like, hey, I've just sometimes if I'm writing a blog post or something, I'll just write crap. Excuse my language, like just random ideas, incomplete thoughts. Couple bullet points. And then you can say, hey, go clean this up. So that's sort of polishing up draft writing. That can work really, really well. Another example of rewriting that was really fun is we were doing a webinar on May 4th. And the nerds out there will recognize May 4th is also known as Star Wars Day.
Yeah.
May the 4th. So we gave our standard webinar invite, copy that we drafted to GPT and said, hey, make this more fun with Star Wars themes and puns. And it did a really good job on that. Again, because you gave it something to work with, but you had it kind of rewrite something kind of, in a different way. So again, it's pretty similar to the transformation, but a slightly different use case, kind of in the rewriting.
I love it.
And then the last 2 use cases Chris talks about are number 1, extraction, which is, he'll talk about, hey, I'll give you an example of how I'm using extraction that's not obvious.
Okay.
One of the interview questions I always use is I ask somebody to tell me when I go speak to their references, what adjectives will I hear? And I find it's a good interview question to kind of get people to talk about their strengths in a way that they're not bragging. They're just saying what other people would say.
Yeah.
Something that I've started doing, which is kind of fun, is before the interview, I'll take all their LinkedIn recommendations.
Okay.
And I'll just copy them, paste that into GPT and said, make me a table of all the adjectives in these recommendations sorted from the most frequent to the least frequent. And instantly I'm getting a table of what are the adjectives people are actually using to describe this person. And I can see how that compares to the adjectives they're saying that they think people use to describe themselves.
Interesting.
So that's an example of extraction.
I'm totally stealing that.
And you could obviously extract things from social media posts about your brand. I don't know what to call a tweet anymore, or other kinds of things that are kind of out there. And this last use case is qualification.
Okay.
Which can be, hey, is this a happy, what is the sentiment of this social post? What are the, he talks about what are the key topics in a podcast episode and so on. We're not using these last 2. We don't use as much. In some ways, they're more useful for data analysts than they are for the content creators. But I do think there are interesting use cases around extraction and classification. So the main takeaway here, more than anything else, and this is the number 1 thing I'd want anybody to learn about how should you use AI in your marketing, is just remember it is a transformer and not a creator. You will get sort of okay content if you ask it to create. You can get really good content if you ask it to transform.
I like it. I've definitely seen when I say, hey, write me something on this, and it's just, like open, kind of write it. Man, sometimes you get those hallucinations where it will say things, and I'm like, I know this is blatantly untrue, but it's very confident that it thinks it's right.
I'll throw out two other
Yeah.
tips. So one of the things that I do pay for GPT-4 myself. So, that it means I can use plugins, which lets it, for example, go read a PDF or a web page. So one of the things that I did once is I took about 10 or 12 articles that I'd written, and I said, analyze these articles to come up with what my voice, tone, and style looks like. And it came back and like, all right, this is your style and tone. And now, what I did is I just, in that same thread, I could ask it to do this kind of summarization creation for me, but in my style and tone.
Yeah.
So it's a good kind of way to sort of tune the algorithm into speaking more the way you want it to sound. And then just released a couple of weeks ago, in the people who pay for GPT-4 is what they call custom instructions. And custom instructions is the ability to tell GPT background about you and how you want it to answer, which again can be a nice way to kind of get it to talk about, in your brand voice or your personal tone of voice.
I love it, man. I love it. So tell me, how do you, let's stick with like your marketing team and the marketing teams of the future a little bit. How do you think this is going to change how teams are set up, structured, roles, different team members? Like, what do you think?
Not to over rely on Chris here, but he's got another line, I think, first off, that's really relevant here, which is that AI probably won't take your job.
Yeah.
But someone who knows how to use AI really well might.
Agreed.
And so that's why I just think it's really super important for every marketer out there to be spending time, learning how to use these tools, experiment, everything. I mean, I just talked about these little ideas and tricks. That just comes with playing with it. Prompt engineering is building a muscle just like any other kind of muscle. So, I think what we'll see is obviously some roles will change. The most dramatic change is going to be in any kind of content creator, whether you're writing written content or creating image content. One of the things that I didn't talk about, is I'll use Midjourney to come up with images, either for featured images for social posts or for keynote presentations. And that's saving time and money that I'm not spending on Shutterstock, but it also means that I don't rely on my my design team to necessarily produce every image that's needed.
Yeah.
Arguably that makes them happy because they can work on more strategic, more valuable things. But again, it raises the bar there, you won't get away with being sort of only a good designer or a good writer or an average designer and writer. So obviously the content creators and copywriters need to both be good at using these tools and also good at adding value above and beyond what the tools can do. I think we'll see an evolution in what the data analysts do. I mean, this is something, again, we haven't spent as much time doing, but you could just throw a big data set at GPT, especially with the new code interpreter, and say, hey, find insights for me, summarize this, this data set into, analyses. So data analysts are going to need to learn how to use these tools. SEO specialists, social media managers. I think, all these roles are going to be affected. I think the most visionary teams will start creating some new roles as well.
Okay. What roles?
Well, first off, you see this in some growth marketing teams, but, will there be data scientists and AI strategists on the marketing teams? People who are sort of forming centers of excellence around this kind of stuff, who really built some expertise in using data to help marketing teams make better decisions. We're speculating here, but will we see people who are really specialists at helping humans collaborate with AI? Will there be a job on a marketing team that's sort of telling all the other marketers, hey, here's what you can do, and how to bridge that gap between what the AI can do and what the human can do? And how do we optimize that human AI collaboration? That's interesting. And then probably the largest, most extreme organizations, we might even see, just like we have data privacy specialists on some marketing teams, we might have like AI ethics specialists on some marketing teams.
I could see that for the big companies.
So the point is there'll be some new roles. And then there'll be a lot of roles that change.
I think there's also, I mean, you kind of alluded to this, but not for the small teams, but more the medium-sized to bigger businesses. Perhaps at least temporarily, I could see a role for somebody just teaching the rest of the team, like how do you use AI? Kind of like an AI trainer, who's like, okay, I know how to do it. My job is just get the rest of you guys empowered to use it.
Yeah, I think I think teams are and should be creating cross-functional AI task forces. That kind of work across the teams to sort of break down the silos and encourage innovation in using this kind of technology.
Okay. All right, man. Well, dude, let's talk a little bit about Demandbase. I know you guys have been using AI at some level for a long time in your product.
Yeah.
But what are you guys doing for your customers with AI? Like what's going on right now and where are you going in the future?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. First off, as you say, AI is not new at Demandbase or frankly, a lot of the go-to-market companies. Companies have been using, so the key to remember is machine learning is a type of AI.
Yep.
And machine learning is any kind of way that you're sort of using large data sets to kind of help something kind of learn how to respond the way a human might respond. Yeah. So we've been using machine learning and AI for years for doing things like scoring leads and then later scoring accounts. Demandbase is known as an intent data provider where we help companies kind of know which accounts in their target market might be researching topics that are of interest to their business, right? In order to figure out that intent data, we're doing natural language processing on billions and billions of signals every single month. That's AI. The way that our ad technology optimizes the bids. Yeah. Because what we want to make sure that big companies don't suck up all the bids, all your budget, which can happen because there's just a lot more employees at the big companies. Yeah. So when we sort of are deciding how to make sure your budget gets spread out nicely, the AI has to ultimately decide, all right, I've already shown impressions to this big company 3 times. Should I not show it this 4th time to hold back some dollars to make sure I have the opportunity to show it to the small company when they come along? Right? That's an interesting AI problem. So the point being is this stuff has been around for a while. I think what's new really more than anything else is the generative AI and all the things that unlocks. So I think what's getting the most excitement in go-to-market tech right now around, I think, generative AI is the possibility of delivering mass personalization at scale. That's been the holy grail of ABM. But, can you actually send, say, a different email to each recipient based on who they are, and what they say, and their background and their context and the history with you and all that kind of stuff. I'll be honest. On one hand, I'm really excited about this. Yeah. On the other hand, we're not there today. I feel like just the email generation itself is kind of a commodity where not only is every sales engagement tool saying, hey, you can use AI to create the emails now, but frankly, my Gmail does that for me now.
Yeah. So does
And
my Outlook does. I
yeah,
start writing you an email and it'll complete my sentence for me.
so A, it's a commodity, but B, I have yet to sort of take any of these emails and say, well, that's really good. So maybe we'll get there. In some ways, I'm more excited about the work that we're doing at Demandbase around, the ability to sort of mass personalized advertising
Yeah.
and use stable diffusion to sort of, create, so that you're seeing a different ad than I'm seeing, in a way that sort of, is more scalable for the marketer.
Okay.
There's a couple other areas where we are using AI that I'm actually really excited about. The first one that I'm probably most excited about is what we call buying group AI.
Okay.
And, buy groups are a big thing in B2B. I think they are going to be the next big thing. In many ways, demand gen started out being all about the individual lead. And we had lead scoring and MQLs. And
Yep.
we realized that leads are insufficient because, just an interaction from one person doesn't necessarily tell you what's actually happening at the company. So that's why we started doing ABM and account-based marketing, because, it solved that problem. But I think what a lot of companies have learned over the last, 8 or 9 years is that while leads are too narrow, accounts are too broad. There are a lot of people at a company at an account who aren't going to be part of your buying committee.
Yep.
And more importantly, if you sell more than one product, you're going to have different buying groups at that same company. And the stage of your relationship with each of the buying groups might be different. Buying group 1 might be a customer, buying group 2 might just be a prospect.
Yep.
And so I think we are going to be moving away from even, not leads, not accounts, but actually to buying groups as sort of the fundamental object that people market to. Serious Decisions and Forrester has been talking about this for like 5 or 6 years now. But the idea hasn't really taken off in practice because it's been too hard for a marketer or a salesperson to actually go and identify the buying groups and the members of the buying group at any individual account. It's just too much data, too much complexity, too much manual work. And so what we're building at Demandbase, buying group AI, is actually going to let us use generative AI techniques to actually identify who is the buying committee for each of your various products. And then at each account, who are the specific contacts and people who should be part of that buying committee? And if they're not in your CRM, how can you add them?
That's amazing.
So this is something I'm super excited about. It's coming. The second use case that I want to talk about is how this technology can actually change the user experience of working with a product. HubSpot released ChatSpot a couple of months ago with a really cool, sexy demo.
Okay.
And we're building something similar at Demandbase. The idea is today, if you're in Demandbase and you want to go build a list of accounts, you're going to go into your UI and you're going to drag and drop. I want accounts with this revenue in this region, in this territory, with this kind of intent. And you're dragging cards over and setting your Boolean filters, which is very powerful, exciting UI. But with the chat user interface, you can just type or even say, hey, you know what? Give me all the accounts in my territory above $500 million of revenue that are showing intent for my products, but nobody's spoken to in 2 weeks. Right? And just say that and have the AI create that selector for you. Right? That I think is going to be really transformative in terms of not just how people use Demandbase, but how we use every piece of enterprise software.
Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. That goes along with something I've been using Chat GPT for as well, as just list building accounts. Where you can say, hey, give me accounts, this area, this industry, and it actually does a really good job of doing that. Not amazing, but it's similar.
I think what's interesting about that is, when you're asking GPT to do that, what data does it have access to?
You don't know.
And it has, maybe their headquarter location, maybe their number of employees. Yeah. And by the way, that data is probably all from 2019 or earlier, because it stopped, learning. And so I think that's actually a great illustration of one of the most important takeaways for how companies are using AI in go-to-market products, which is that the company with the best data is going to deliver the best AI.
Yeah.
And poor data in is going to lead to poor data out. The reality is these algorithms are somewhat commoditized, right? I mean, we can all just download our own, large language model from Meta, and lo and behold, boom, we've got an LLM, right? And we can get all sorts of really sophisticated machine learning algorithms off the shelf from Amazon. What differentiates the ability to make good decisions, good predictions, good insights, right, is not the algorithm, but it's the quality of the data that is feeding, the algorithms. Yeah. That's why, Demandbase, we invest a ton in our data, our firmographic data, our contact data, our intent data, our technographic data, and why there's this race across all the AI vendors to collect as much data as possible. I even think, I was reading something the other day that, all these vendors, including Demandbase, we've got to figure out how are we going to charge for the AI capabilities, right? Is it just included, or do you pay extra? Khan Academy, to switch out of B2B for a minute, right? Khan Academy provides free math service, tutoring services to people, and that's their mission, to make it free. They've created a GPT-based tutor, right? So that if you ask this chatbot, how do I solve this math problem? It doesn't just give you the answer. It Socratically walks you through how to get to the answer. So you're actually learning. It's super cool stuff. Yeah. But it's incredibly expensive for them to run, because these LLMs are expensive to run. They actually have to charge for it. And they're working through how do they sort of make that work with their model. Businesses are the same way, right? Demandbase, do we charge for this? Do we not charge for this? One of the things that I think will be interesting is that there'll be deals that companies strike with their customers, that effectively, you let me have access to your data, and I will give you the AI cheaper or free. Yeah. And you sort of saw Zoom do that last week with their new terms of service.
Oh, okay.
Where they sort of are saying, hey, we might use all this stuff that all your calls that you're doing, to feed our AI. That's going to be a trend, I think, is, companies figuring out how to get access to data, because the takeaway here is the best data wins.
Okay. I like it, man. We've got 2 minutes before we got to wrap up. What is your one or two pieces of advice, and remind us what the book by Chris, what's it called again? Because I want to go read that. I'm sure other people listening do.
It's something like the woefully incomplete guide to AI in marketing.
Okay. And then we're going to drop that into the comments. We'll go find it. We'll find the link to it on Amazon, drop it in the comments for people. But what's your,
I just looked up, it's the woefully incomplete book of generative AI.
Okay. We'll get that in the comments for everybody. What's your one piece of advice for people that have, they haven't even dipped their toe into the AI space yet for marketing, but they want to? What would you tell them? Where do they start?
Sign up for a GPT account.
Okay.
I mean, like literally, I told my team one day at a team meeting, that is literally what I had everybody on my team do. Is like, okay, right now in this team meeting, everybody go sign up.
All right.
Because you just got to, it's a learning curve. You just got to play with it to learn it.
I love it, man. I love it. Thank you so much, Jon. We're going to, I know Matt Hines is up next, and we'll just hand it off to Matt. And thank you again, Jon.
Thank you. Super duper. Looking forward to Matt's presentation. Take care.